What's going on, everyone? So since I did videos discussing the other two trial decks, I felt like I was obligated to do one for Shadow Legion. This is my least favorite of the three trial decks. I feel like it's just really missing something. Mystical Hunter shined with all the ambushes and defensive cards that it had, prolonging the game and making your opponent really have to think to try and get to your barriers, while Alpha Dominance provided a more aggressive approach, putting out large creatures and destroying cards that your opponent put out, and having a lot of Fort Bursts that punished your opponent for attacking. Those two decks shined in those areas, and I felt that was what made them good, because they had a focus to their deck. This deck is just kind of small creatures, and there's really nothing else to that. So there is one Fort Burst card in this deck, but it's nothing that you really want to see activated. I mean, it is a creature, so you get a body on the board, but it's not that great of a creature, and it doesn't really do anything. And then there are, I believe, 3 ambushes in the deck, but again, they're not really that great. They don't provide any advantage to you aside from destroying your opponent's creatures. So, this deck also, it uses a lot of 1-cost creatures, allowing you to swarm the field, but if your opponent gets lucky and rolls all 4 or above, you're not going to be able to break them. And I feel like this deck just falls short of the other two. So, I mean, I have spoken with a lot of people that think that this is the best deck, and I mean, shout out to them because I can't figure out how to play this. I have tried. This was the deck that I was actually most excited for, and this is the one that I was planning on using, but yeah, it just didn't really capture me once I actually had the cards. But anyways, let's jump into this. So, first up, starting with the black cards, we have Lady Valistra. So, this card I feel isn't as good as Remus or Zargo, because I feel like your opponent can more easily play around this card. When you use it to attack, they don't have to block unless you drag across it, but then you're giving up your black dice. And if your opponent was smart, they're going to leave the black for last, giving you only your yellow and red dice to drag across your creatures with. And then if you're using this as a defender, your opponent can just play around that, wait to attack the fort, maybe only attack with a creature that they have 1 color of. But yeah, I mean, maybe in the future, this card will start to see some play in a deck that really shines. Once mono red or mono yellow becomes a thing, maybe she'll be better. But I think for right now, she just kind of falls short of the other 2 boss monsters. And then we got Undying Executioner. So this is one of the cards that I was most excited for, and I would still recommend picking up just because it's a 2-drop with Deadly, and would really punish your opponent for attacking if this card is a blocker. But again, it's something that's easy to play around, and it would be better to force your opponent to attack this. But aside from that, it doesn't really do much. However, being able to play it first turn and just scare your opponent out of attacking is something good that you can use this card for. And then we got Death Metal Rotter, who is a 4-cost 5/4. I think this is the strongest monster in the deck aside from Valistra. So this is what you're going to be using to break the shields. But by that time, you should have a few smaller creatures on the field, but they only give you 2 of these in the deck. So your chances of Athena are not very great, and if your opponent keeps rolling high numbers, your smaller creatures aren't going to be able to break it down. And then we got this guy. I'm not going to attempt to say his name. I've actually never seen him in my hand, or if I did, I never played him because he was never the optimal play. But I still see potential for this card in a black deck, just because he lets you recycle cards that are in your graveyard. But yeah, I think this is one of the better cards that are in the deck, but 3 cost is still kind of high for him. I think if he was 2, he would be a lot better. And then we got Crowd Surfer. So this is the Fort Bursta deck. It's just a 2/2/2. So, I mean, in Alpha Dominance, we had the Thornbark Walker, which was a 4/4 creature that summoned itself, as well as Hidden Blade, which is a 4/1. This doesn't really put any pressure on your opponent, being only 2/2. You'd have to drag across it to break a 3, and then aside from that, it's not going to survive any attack if you use it as a blocker. Then we got Carbuncle Imp, and I feel like this is one of the better 1-cost creatures that we've seen so far. If you do have the option to drag across it with red, because then it becomes a 5/4, I believe, or a 4/3. Yeah, 5/4. I'm almost certain. I can't really see the numbers through my camera. But he is able to break the opponent's higher rolls, but then it just leaves your fort open. So, again, that's kind of why I don't like this deck. When you do attack, you don't really have a lot to protect yourself with. But this is definitely a cool card, and maybe worth picking up like 2 copies. I wouldn't buy the trial deck just for this card, though. But then we got Wandering Apparition. So she becomes a 3/0, or a 3/1, when she attacks a Drago Shield. So this is the card that you're going to be using the most to break Drago Shields when your opponent rolls a 3. And I feel like she's one of the better 1-cost creatures that we've had. But aside from that, she doesn't really do much. Then we got Adrace's Disdain, which lets you destroy a Drago-crossed creature. So you don't want to see this in your opening hand. Maybe mid-game to gain some advantage. But I think this card definitely shines in the late game. Yeah, as I said in the opening, I think this is a good card to have at 2. I would not be running 3 or 4 of this, if I ran it at all. But then, if you have a black 4/6, you also get to destroy a Drago Shield. So, this is one of the only spell cards that does that, I believe. I believe there might be a green or a blue card that does the same thing. But those spell cards are few, so it is cool to see some that have it. And then we got Death Trap. So, it does stop the attack, which is kind of nice by destroying the creature, but only destroying one creature doesn't make it as great as something like Pyroblast or EMP from the Mystical Hunters deck. But this is still a really cool card. It might be worth playing at 2. I don't know if it's worth running more than that. I mean, maybe if you're going to get mono yellow with Sunscale Dragon or something else that gains effects when it attacks. Like Zero, this would be a great card against Zero. Never mind, Zero can't be targeted. But yeah, this is a great card to stop your opponent's larger attacks. So moving on to the red cards, we have Ravian Battlefield Shrieker, which is one of the better ambushes that we've seen. However, a creature does have to be destroyed in order to trigger her. So, I do prefer cards like EMP or Kingslayer V that just have to have the fort be attacked. So, this is a decent card just because it does 2 damage to all of your opponent's creatures, and in the mirror match, this card is probably going to be blowing up their whole field. So definitely worth picking some of these up if you're looking to play a red deck. But again, you do have to have a creature be destroyed. And then we got Blade Dance Rogue. So this is a decent 2/3/2 creature. Probably one of the better vanillas in this deck, just because of its low cost and higher stats. And I did really like seeing this in my opening hand, just because it felt like it gave me some more power to my cards. But then we got Goblin Madcap. So this card is essential to this deck because it does 3 damage to your opponent's Drago Shield when it dies, and that'll allow you to attack over it if you didn't destroy it. So using all these small creatures, I feel like he is definitely essential, and I wish they would have given 4 copies of him in the deck. But the other one that we have is Goblin Toe Stabber, who does 1 damage to a Drago Shield. So he could bring the 4s down to a 3, just a Wandering Aberration can blow over them. But I feel like this card is kind of lackluster, doing only 1 damage. I would have rather seen something like Sarg, the dwarf battlesmith. I can't remember his exact name, but I think he would have been a better card. But he's going to be a rare in Rally to War, so I guess they were saving the better cards for that. And then we got Pyroblast. So while this card does allow you to blow up your opponent's creatures, it does depend on the value of your red dice. So if they happen to destroy your red dice, or you roll low value, then you're not going to be able to do as much. So this card is good. However, I don't think it's as strong as everyone thought that it was when the demo deck was out. So I wrote up the red cards, and moving on to yellow. First we got Bountiful Angel. So in my Let's Talk, I believe I said that this was just kind of a meh card, but in this deck, I do think this card is amazing. Letting you draw cards after you play a lot of your smaller creatures out, it just replenishes your hand, which is really awesome. And this is probably one of my favorite artworks, and the foiling does look cool on this one. So definitely worth picking up this and Ravian. Aside from everything else, I don't think you really need unless you want something specific for the deck. But all of the Trial Deck exclusives are the cards that you don't necessarily need. So I would just pick up these and then wait for Rally to War to come out to get the rest of your cards. But then we got Sunscale Stage. So he's a 3-drop with 3/4. So I was usually using him as a blocker just because of his large defense or endurance. But I would have rather had another 2-cost. Harpy Huntress would have been amazing in this deck just because it becomes a 5/4 and it's only 2-cost. So I'm kind of shocked that they didn't put it in the deck just because I felt like it would have fit so well. So once Rally to War comes out, I am probably going to try to rebuild this deck and make it better, utilizing the lower cost creatures and using a lot of effects that allow them to boost themselves up. And then we got Goldleaf Hunter, which is a 2-drop, 2/3, so doesn't really do much. That's another thing. A lot of the cards in here don't really have effects. They have Dragocross abilities, which boost themselves up, or Wandering Aberration, who boosts herself when she attacks. And aside from that, they don't have any other effects, such as the cards that are in Mystical Hunters or Alpha Dominance. And I feel like that's another way that this deck just falls short. And then we got All Things Blessing as the last card. So this card is, you need to see this card to even have a chance in this deck, because it boosts your creature up by 2/2, so that's how you're going to be breaking the Drago Shields. And then if you have a 4/6 on your yellow dice, you get to draw a card. So it's more that hand replenishing. And as I said in the Alpha Dominance video, I was wrong about drawing not being important. Drawing is really important. So I was wrong to say that you weren't going to need to draw. And yeah, so run cards that let you draw no matter what deck you're playing. If you're playing something with slightly bigger creatures and you're going to be playing it a little bit slower, I don't think it's as necessary, but it still helps just let you draw more of your cards and gives you more options. So yeah, let me know what you guys thought of this deck down below. Are you one of the people that liked this? If so, what was appealing to this that wasn't to the other two? Mostly because I'm curious to hear your feedback on this. Like I said, this was my favorite deck on paper, but once I actually got the cards, it really didn't fit me. So anyways, Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter. Link is down in the description below. And as always, thanks for watching.